Doc, need one. One, Roger.
521.
You started me a card for a parking problem.
And for your 23.
Yes, that's for I'll get a 28 from one truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Here's a one truck, Boy Lincoln X-ray 985, should come back up and heading slowly.
So you had 2000 Patrick Spalding.
10-4. If you can just put a little note on the log that I'm going to be leaving a note on his vehicle advising him to remove it.
Fuck. Fuck.
Thank you so much for coming back to our channel. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We appreciate you taking the time to, listen to these stories. And today I have with me Jennifer Tisdall. She's somebody that I know personally. I've known her for a little over a year. I work with her on a regular basis. And, she is the owner of Design Studio 426, and she's also an author and an aspiring speaker. So she really wants to get a message out about, domestic abuse and the issues that domestic abuse can bring for a person and, in a situation, and then how to actually get over it. So you're actually writing two different books. The first one is Domestic Violence, Conquering the Demons. And the second one is Unpack Yourself, Get Your Life Back. I really love the sound of both of those. And, I'd really like to kind of pick your brain a little bit about both of the different books and, the situations that you went through in order to, bring you to the point where you felt it necessary to write the books.
Sure. So the first one, well, actually the second one, Unpack Yourself. So, when you go through a story of abuse and you finally get out, you're kind of at a point to where you're not really sure, what do I do next? How do I get back to who I'm supposed to be? Because when you're in an abusive relationship, you kind of are put into somebody else's world and they control everything you do. Mine controlled the money. I couldn't see my friends. He tried to block me from my family. There's just a lot of stuff. So when I finally was able to get out, I was stuck because I didn't know where to go. There's just so many things that you need to figure out. Well, how do I go back to work, without feeling like he's stalking me? How do I get my friends and my family back? How do I get myself back? So that was one of the books that I started to write to help other women that are just stuck like I was, to get back on their feet and realize, there's a good person inside of there. You just have to break out of all those horrible things that were said to you or done to you. You just have to get back to who you are. The second book that I'm writing is my story. So you and I had spoke about doing this, and I had thought, I have never really told my story. So it's been 12 years since I got out of my relationship. I've been wanting to write my whole story from the beginning to the end of everything that happened to me, because I feel like I've never closed that chapter. I've never finished what I needed to finish for myself. Here I want to help other people, but I'm still, my story will never end. Every time I hear somebody gets abused or somebody gets killed, it punches me back and takes me back to that place. It's a slap in the face. It's a punch to the gut. I relive it all over again. I don't want anybody else to go through that. It's a horrible thing to go through. So I kind of am hoping that my story will invoke something in somebody else that says, hey, that's that's my situation, and know that I'm actually on the other side of it, and that I actually survived to be able to help somebody possibly get out of that kind of a relationship.
Yeah. And one of the things that, I'm really hoping from this series, and I actually had an interview earlier today. So it's so funny that, you bring up emotional abuse, because a lot of people think that domestic abuse is physical violence. And there are so many different aspects to abuse besides physical violence. There are a lot of abusive relationships where no one lays a hand on anyone. Emotional abuse, financial abuse, psychological abuse, there's so many different things. And so she and I talked a little bit about the emotional abuse aspect of it. And, telling your story is really, really important. And I'm hoping that from people watching this series, I'm hoping that people that are in abusive relationships are watching this series. I'm hoping people that are friends or family with people that are in abusive relationship or relationships are watching the series. Because I think when we're in these relationships, we rationalize the behavior, right?
Yep.
Because like, oh, that's just normal.
Right.
And the first person that I talked to in this entire series, she didn't grow up in an abusive household. And so even though the behaviors that her boyfriend had exhibited towards her weren't a normal part of what she'd seen in her life growing up, she didn't understand that they weren't good behaviors. And so I'm hoping that by people talking about everything that they've gone through and the different things that they've seen and the different things that they've experienced, somebody will realize that this type of behavior isn't okay. And it's okay to question the behavior and to question the relationship and whether you should be in the relationship at all.
Right.
And, you raise children in this relationship too. And, I
Yep.
know that's even harder because, kids they're innocent bystanders.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. And in my relationship too, he'd always threatened that if I ever left, he'd kill me. And I guess what really bothers me too, once I finally got out, people would ask me, well, how come you just didn't leave him? How come you didn't tell him to stop? For anybody that's never been in that kind of a domestic violence relationship doesn't understand. It's not that simple. It's not simple. I tried to leave him 3 times. And somehow he knew every time when I was leaving him, he would come home to find me packing. And my punishment, I would get my butt beat and I'd have a gun put to my head every single time. So you kind of do whatever you can to appease that person, because when he always said, hey, if you ever leave me, I'm going to kill you. Well, I had kids, and that mama bear instinct comes out. I don't want my kids to ever be without me. I don't want them to have to grow up without a mom. So I stayed. I took the abuse for 6+ years because I didn't want them to be without me. And anybody, like I said, that has not been in that kind of relationship has no idea how hard it really is to leave somebody. Because you always think, oh, well, if I love him just a little bit more, he'll be nicer to me. Or, I give him all my money and he gives me a little bit of money and he pays attention to me. You get kind of in those relationships where it's not comfortable, but you don't know anything else.
right.
You're afraid to leave. You're afraid to talk to anybody. I had guy friends, and I had to get rid of all my guy friends because he thought I was going to go and cheat on him. On the rare occasion that I did get to leave the house and hang out with my friends, I had to tell him where I was going, who I was meeting, what time I got there, what I ate. I mean, it's just a very controlling relationship. And once you get brainwashed to be where I was certain he was going to kill me, and I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, it's hard. And like you said, a lot of people don't realize that when you're in these relationships, the abusers spend an inordinate amount of time breaking you down and making you feel worthless. And,
Yep.
Like you wouldn't be any good to anybody else. And, that sometimes they make you question your reality. Like, they tell you that you deserve it. And so then you start thinking like, what did I do wrong? Did I do something wrong? Maybe I did deserve it. Maybe I did talk too loud. Maybe I didn't put everything perfectly on the table. Maybe I did scratch this dish or do something, just ridiculously stupid that it does not justify the response that we get. But it's, the continuation of the abuse, like, it just, we start to question ourselves, our very being. And like you said, with children, like I grew up in a very violent household, and I have seen, my mother being choked. I've seen her being punched and thrown around and being threatened with death if she even dared to say anything to anyone or do anything. And I know how terrified I was as a child witnessing that. I can only imagine what she was going through. And there are a lot of people that are stuck in these situations that they really don't understand, like, how to really get out of the relationship because they are scared.
Yep.
So, you said that you were afraid of the physical violence and you were afraid of actually being killed. How did you actually get away?
So so he had been planning a vacation. He was going hunting in November. And I'd always wanted to go back to school. Well, for whatever reason, he finally allowed me to go back to school. And my first night back to school, I called my mom and I said, Mom, I need your help. I said, this is what's going on. I said, I was going to stay until November and move when he was gone. That way I didn't have to worry about anything, and I told her, I said, I just can't. So my mom, went and got a U-Haul, called her boss and said, hey, I'm going the next day. So while he was at work, I packed whatever I could and we got the U-Haul and just got out. But I mean, it didn't end at that point. He would drive by my house 3 or 4 times a day to see what I was doing. Who was I with? Who was I talking to? I was afraid to just go to the grocery store because I'd be afraid he'd be behind me. It was personal protection order after personal protection order. And, I got out of a sheltered life to go back into a sheltered life because, I didn't want him to harm me. I didn't want him to harm my mom. I didn't want him to harm my kids. He would show up at school to pick our son up from daycare, and they wouldn't release him because he smelled of alcohol. That was his big thing. He started drinking at 13. So on top of all that, he just learned, he was miserable. He was a miserable person and he wanted to make everybody else miserable. So I finally just had enough. After I saw him start to abuse my oldest son, that was it for me. I was done. And I stood up to him that day, which was an amazing feeling, to stand up to somebody that has put you down for so long. And he raised his fist to me and I just said, you know what, go ahead. It's the last time you're ever going to touch me. And I took my kids and I was gone, but it was, like I said, it was over and over and over again. He'd drive by my house. He'd call me, you just finally get numb to all that. And you just try to put it aside, the best you can.
Yeah. And after that, like, how long did he continue that behavior before he stopped, or has he even stopped?
Well, he is actually no longer on this earth. So he passed away in 2004. And it was continual for years, and we finally ended up getting a divorce. But we had to see each other all the time because we had a son together.
Yeah.
So he would, he'd bring our son home late, or he'd call me, hey, you need to come and get him, so that I was out of my element. It continued for, until he was gone, until he died. So
how was he after you guys split up? How was he towards your son?
I have 2 kids. One is from a previous relationship. He pretty much put him to the side and didn't really pay much attention to him. But to our younger one, he was good. There was days that he would get very frustrated. He'd start drinking. He'd be upset because he couldn't pay bills, and then he would yell and scream at our son. So I mean, he had good days, he had bad days. But and my son, if you ask him today, he doesn't remember a lot of it, which is a blessing, but he treated him well, he never abused him.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of times that's not the case for some children. But I mean, it still sucks because then you're stuck with this person, literally stuck with this person in your life, basically forever, or until somebody passes away because of, this relationship with the children. And that can cause a lot of problems because, like you said, I mean, he has excuses to come over, he has excuses to show up to things, he has excuses to call, and it's an easy way for them to keep tabs on you. And a lot of times the abusers sometimes even try to turn the children against the parents that took them away, because you took me away from my dad, or you took all this crazy stuff. So it can be really, really bad and severely detrimental mentally for children. So it's nice that didn't happen, and that things kind of worked out,
He
to your
tried
benefit, not really to his, but
right. Well, and he tried to turn the courts against me. He called Child Protective Services on me. I mean, he didn't have a leg to stand on, but he was just so upset that I took his kids from him.
yeah.
Well, I saved those kids from him,
Right.
So.
Yeah. And so, I really like, again, the idea of your book, Unpack Yourself, Get Your Life Back, because this series is, called Messages of Hope. And my hope for this series is for people to understand that, again, if they're watching this and they're in a relationship, they know somebody that's in a relationship, or they have gotten out of a relationship and they don't really know what to do, that there is hope. There's hope for a better life, that you can find good love after a horrible relationship, because a lot of people that are in these abusive relationships, they go from abusive relationship to abusive relationship to abusive relationship because they don't understand how to break the cycle. They don't understand how to really love themselves enough to accept a good person in their life, or to understand that they deserve a good relationship. And now I know that you have a really good relationship after, and you're writing this book to help other people see, other women see that there is a way to get out, and there is a way to get over it, and there is a really good way to move on. What key things do you think you have to share about that with people?
Well, like I said, people that are out there that don't understand what it's like to be in a domestic relationship. You have to kind of start to break the stigmas of, well, you could have left him, or you could have done this, you could have done that, but also understand that, those people that are in your life, you need to help them figure out how to get out. So if you have people that are like your sister or your best friend or whatever, and that they're in a relationship, you need to figure out a way to help them, whether it's, I don't know, helping them pack, or getting them some help, or, bringing in some mediation of some sort to kind of get them out of that situation. For me, it was, like I said, I didn't want to leave because I didn't want my kids to get hurt. But when the abuse goes to your children, then, there's a different story. I handled abuse for a long time because that's what I needed to do, but when they start to go after your children and your family, then you need to get out. So you just have to be strong. Like I said, it took me 3 times to get out, but never quit. If you don't feel that you can do it the first time, don't quit. You need to find that grounding space. You need to dig deep to kind of put all that stuff aside, realize I am a good person. I have a lot to live for. I have a lot to give. You shouldn't ever have to feel like you're nothing, because you are something. You're on this earth for a reason. And that reason is not to go through the abuse. I mean, it happens, but life makes you the person you were meant to become. It makes you that stronger person. And if you don't go through those things, like a death in the family. You're not going to get stronger. You learn from the stuff that you go through, and then hopefully, once you're out and things are great, then you can help somebody else, and then that cycle will continue. People helping people, and trying to stop all these issues of physical, mental abuse.
Yeah. And it's funny that you, again, I've had a couple of different conversations with a couple different women now in the last week, and we just keep going over the same things, right? Like women, and I'm not going to say specifically women, because there are men and there are parents that get abused by their children. There
Absolutely.
are siblings that get abused by their siblings. Roommates that can abuse other roommates. You can be in a living situation and not be romantically tied to someone and still be a victim of abuse.
Right.
But a lot of times the abused person, they're left feeling worthless.
Yeah.
Right? Because they don't feel strong enough to stand up for whatever, and they don't feel like they can, if I do something, it's just going to make the situation worse.
Right.
And it's really hard to overcome that, and like you said, it was, and it's kind of the same thing with the woman that I talked to earlier, Mel Graham. She said that she dealt with the abuse until her husband started abusing their eldest son. And as soon as he started abusing their eldest son, she was like, wait here, something's got to change. And that was when she made the change. But is there something that you think could be done for the person that's in a relationship to be able to leave before it gets to the point where the abuse turns towards the children?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I mean, it's, I spent a lot of time walking on eggshells and being very gentle and being very soft and make sure dinner was ready on time, because I didn't want to suffer any more abuse. I didn't want to go through all of that again. So, I mean, you just have to kind of formulate a plan, understand that things are better on the other side. You just have to figure out how you're going to get there. Whatever you need to do, talk to a friend, say, hey, I need some help with this. There's a lot of people that you should have people in your network, even though my circle was very small at that point. But once I was out in school, there's a lot of people you could talk to. And a lot of these people have jobs. So they've got a boss. They've got, owner of a company. You could talk to that person and say, hey, this is what I really need some help with. I know you don't want to share your whole entire story because you don't want them to, think badly about you. It's tough. But if you formulate a plan and start thinking, hey, there's got to be a way to get out of this, and don't fight or don't quit fighting, eventually you're going to figure it out. Eventually you have to figure it out. Think of all the things that are positive in your life. Okay, you're in a horrible situation, but maybe you have kids. Your kids are great. You're lucky to have a house. I know it's not the house you want to be in, but there's just a lot of things that you have to be thankful for, and just put that at the forefront of, these are the things that I want to enjoy for the rest of my life. How do I get out of what I'm in?
Right. And so speaking of judgment, that's another thing that a lot of people, like, we struggle with asking for help because we're terrified of judgment, right? And unfortunately, it's what people do. And I think it's absolutely horrible that we judge the people who are being abused.
Yeah.
Like, why doesn't she just leave him? Why doesn't he just leave? Why doesn't, why do they put up with it? Why do they stay? Like, they really have a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as cut and dry as like, I'm in the door, I'm out the door. I'm in the door, I'm out the door. Like, that's just not how it works.
No.
And so, it's the whole victim blaming thing, which is really prevalent, particularly in sexual assault. So it makes people really not want to reach out for help, because, somebody says, hey, you should have just left him years ago. And it's horrible, and it's really, really difficult to deal with.
Right.
And it's tough. It's really tough admitting to somebody that you made a mistake,
Mhm.
that you made a bad choice. And not only did you make a bad choice, but you made a bad choice for how long? How many years? 13 years?
Yeah.
I made a bad choice for 7 years. And, and I made another bad choice for a couple of years after that, and another couple of the bad choices. And, we don't want to have to admit that we're wrong. Right.
Right.
And it's hard. So if you could pick like one single thing that you think people should know about domestic abuse and domestic abuse awareness, what would you say would be the most important thing?
I would say it is a real huge problem. A lot of times you don't hear about the stories because people are afraid to come forward and say, hey, you know what? My husband abuses me. Because if that husband finds out, guess what? Now you're going to get abused even more. It's a huge problem. There has to be a way to fix it. I don't know how. We're still working on all of that, but I would say like you said, don't judge people. I mean, be more accepting of people and try to help people for whatever they need. Just if you have to be an ear, just be an ear and listen to that person. Understand that they're not staying because they want to stay there. They're staying because they have to stay there. That person has broke them down so much that they just don't, like you said, they feel worthless. They feel unloved. They don't feel like their life is meaning. So where else are they going to go? What else are they going to do? So it's huge. It's a big problem.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I teach is mindfulness. And one of the things that, one of the reasons why I really wanted to do this for domestic violence awareness is number one, getting everyone's message out there, because I want, so here's the interesting thing. I thought that I would put a call to action out there and interview 2 people to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into 2 groups on Facebook, only 2 groups, and I have 40 people.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is such a huge problem. It's so much bigger than people realize. And
Yeah.
so I want to give a voice to the voiceless. And I want people to understand that this is a really big problem. And from a mindfulness perspective, I really want people to really be aware of other people. So, you work in an office, you can work in an office next to someone for 20 years and never know that that person is being abused, because they're terrified that if anyone finds out, that they're going to be dead, or
Yeah.
that something bad is going to happen. And then when it does finally come out that this has been happening, everyone's like, oh my God, I had no idea. But you really could have had an idea if you'd really paid attention.
Yeah.
So, what do you think would be like one of the key signs that someone should really notice about, someone who's in an abusive relationship? So like, was there something specific that, you remember that you had to do all the time? Like, I know for me, when I was a kid, like it was covering bruises, like how do I hide the bruises? And even until this day, I still I won't wear shorts,
Yeah.
because I used to have bruises on my legs all the time that I didn't want to have to explain. So I won't wear shorts. I don't wear short skirts. If I do wear short skirts, I wear black opaque tights or white tights so that you can't see through it, just because it's something that's so ingrained in my psyche that I can't show my legs, because I was always terrified of having to explain, like, where did those bruises come from?
Right. I would say for me, I got really good at making excuses. When my family was having dinner, and he didn't want us to go, I was really good at making up excuses to appease them and not make him angry. So we would have, my family would have dinner. My mom did dinners like every other Sunday. The whole family would come over, and, I would have to say, I'm sorry, so-and-so's not feeling good, just because he didn't want to be in that situation, because he was always afraid that somebody would find out what was going on, like he would slip and do something to where somebody would find out. And I remember my youngest was about 2, and my aunt and my uncle were here from Montana. It was my mom's birthday, and they surprised her. And my uncle had looked at me and he took me aside and he said, "What's going on at home?" And I said, "Nothing, things are great." "He's abusing you, isn't he?" And I got the look from my husband, what are you going to say? So of course I have to say no, and I have yet to tell my uncle, he'll be 90, I have yet to tell him, you know what, you were right all along. I just was so afraid to say anything to anybody because I knew I would get my butt beat again,
Well, it's unfortunately something that a lot of people go through, and I'm so sorry that you had to go through everything. But I am a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And as horrible as that sounds, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
And it's funny that you say that because I have that tattoo right here. After I left him, that's a tattoo that I got, and it stands true. What didn't kill me made me stronger. I'm a better person. Even though I went through something horrible, I just want to help people not have to go through that and share my story. So maybe I could save somebody the anger and the hatred and all of that I was put through, save somebody's life. It's a good day.
Yeah. And, maybe, by writing your books and by speaking about what you're writing about, you can, maybe somebody's only been in an abusive relationship for a year, and talking about what you went through and the things that this person put you through can maybe, wake them up and make them realize, like, oh, maybe what he's doing or what she's doing, or what they're doing isn't right. And I really should question this and think about, because honestly, the longer you stay in a relationship, the harder it is to leave. So because you just become so enmeshed and so entwined in all bullshit that it's so hard to extricate yourself from everything. And they get more time to wear you down.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's really, really hard. But I really want to take the time, to thank you for telling us your story and for sharing with us, everything that you went through. I know it wasn't everything. So if everybody wants to hear everything that Jennifer went through, the nice thing is that she came out on the other side in a good way. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen for a lot of people. There are a lot of people who are not fortunate enough to come out of it at all. And so I'm hopeful that, this series will help a lot more people realize that this is a huge problem. It's a worldwide problem. And we really need to pay attention. We need to be mindful. We need to speak up. If you see something, say something. And don't be afraid to help someone, to say, I see you and I'm here for you. Whether you're going to accept my help now or not, I want you to understand that I'm here for you whenever you're ready, because we can't push someone to do something that they're not ready to do, right? If more people knew that there was somebody there to help pick them up when they're ready to fall, they would have no problem at all jumping off the cliff. They really wouldn't.
Right.
But I think a lot of people, they don't know that there's a parachute or they don't know, that there's, a trampoline or something at the end of the chasm. And so they're just terrified, because it's easier to stay than it is to leave, because, staying is comfortable, right? Like, it's not comfortable, but it's what you know. And okay, I can tolerate this, and I've been tolerating it, but the unknown is completely, scary. I don't know what's going to happen. And so, these stories, I'm hoping, will really help people to understand that, once you walk through that door, there is so much more amazing stuff on the other side than, what you've had to deal with. So I truly appreciate your story and the fact that you're writing about it and that you really want to speak about it to help people. So, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So, if any of you watching this, found this series to be of value, if you have any messages or anything, feel free to leave a comment. There's going to be more stories that are coming in the series. So if you're interested in hearing more about what other people have to say, because I'm going to be talking to different people from different aspects of the situation, then, go ahead and like and subscribe for, notifications when the next videos are posted. And then I will post Jennifer's information in the description and in the link comments so that you guys can find her on social media and, give her a like, check out her studio. She does some really awesome design work. She's really talented. And then I don't know if she'll let me share her Etsy shop or not, but she creates these cool little voodoo dolls. So,
Something that kind of helps me get through things.
right. I mean, like if you're in a situation and you really can't leave, but you really want to do something, poke that damn voodoo doll,
Absolutely.
It might be the best thing that you can do right now, but it's something, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So, but thank you again so much for joining us, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Crystal.